Good morning and welcome to this morning's Carrier Update presented by PowerFleet. I'm Tony Mulvey, joined with Zach Strickland. Zach, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Tony. The tender rejection rate, however, is not, or I guess depends on your perspective. From a carrier perspective, it's not doing that great. We continue to fall, 9.2% versus 9.4% yesterday. So pretty big chunks. Like we still are in this like rapid deceleration of, or acceleration of tender rejection rate decline, and that's. It is a little like worrisome in terms of freight volumes, and obviously it correlates heavily with spot market volume erosion, as we've seen a lot of over the last bit. Now, looking at this chart though, this is the seasonality view. So I really want to kind of pay attention to, if you look back in the middle of February, we were on par, or we were close to where we were in 2021. So not a lot had changed year over year. We just heard those earnings reports. So through most of Q1, we were actually right around the same level. And these contract rates, which I'll get to here in a few segments, were much higher. So we're talking about spot market volumes were still high, and contract rates have increased significantly year over year in the first part of the year. So these earnings that you're looking at and reading for these carriers, brokers, et cetera, the stuff that we've been talking about hasn't necessarily materialized yet on those income statements and earnings reports. March was the first time, early March was the first time we really saw this definitive movement in overall decline or deterioration in the truckload sector specifically. So April continues to be more of the same. So I think the second quarter earnings reports are going to be the ones that we're really going to want to pay attention to and see some definitive movement away from what we've seen probably over the last, 5 quarters or so.
Yeah, I think when you think about by March, when this really started to happen, the quarter's essentially done. I mean, it's not done, but you're 2/3 of the way through the quarter, and we were still at high levels, right? Yeah. We really haven't seen the deterioration really till, even April, when you've kind of seen that 15, we were at, 15% right before?
We ended the month at 15%, which was the high of 2019. Yeah. So things were still extra, even though we were easing, relative to history, we were still historically high.
I guess my question, where do we go? Yeah. We were down from 15 to 9 in the past almost a month now.
Yeah, just under a month.
You would think this week, right, last week of the month, you'd kind of see this little uptick or maybe a slowdown in the deceleration. Yeah, we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, that's the big question. If you look at 2019, or 2020, I should say there, that orange line trough, that's the theoretical limit. Like that is when things are at the bottom. I think we saw roughly 2.2% OTRI right as the economy was shut down at the beginning of the pandemic, before things obviously heated up rapidly. So that to me is almost full utilization, which is where we see it's a really, really soft market. 0, I guess, is the absolute limit, but it's not really likely because you have networks and things like that if they don't have enough volume, they can't cover everything. They can't get anywhere because nothing's moving. So 2% is probably as low as this index will probably ever get in theory. So looking at let's go to the next chart and look at the volumes here, because they're moving, they're painting a little bit different of a picture. And this is why it's interesting that the tender rejection rates are decelerating still as rapidly as they are, because tender volumes, yet again, ticking up, 0.74% day over day. The trend, of course, is flatlining over the last several weeks. If you take out that Easter basket that we talked about yesterday, I normally measure those from start of holiday to end of holiday, and we're actually doing better. Yeah. So if anything, this is actually a trend up. So accepted volumes are actually higher than they were going in because the tender rejection rate has fallen. So overall contracted load movements actually seeing an uptick here. So the volume situation in the truckload space has stabilized a little bit, even though those rejection rates have actually, they're still falling. So that just means carriers have run out of space on the spot market.
Yeah, and ultimately that leads to spot rates, right? If you put OTRI and spot rates over, they kind of it's not one-to-one, but they definitely follow the same trend.
Yeah.
Whereas if you put spot rates on here, it doesn't necessarily follow that same trend. But, I mean, we're kind of in this last week of the month that typically is, when you think about it, it's the strongest week of every month, right? Because shippers want to get things off their docks, things like that. Do you think as we enter May, we kind of see those impacts
I think,
of like what we were seeing prior? Or?
Yeah, I think one of the things we're seeing is now they're shipping at a discount. Some of that freight they weren't shipping because of those high spot rates, they're now getting at a theoretical discount. And they don't have the sense of urgency, so they're starting to say, oh, wait, we don't have to worry about working so hard to get capacity. So that's probably a little bit of that.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Zach, for this carrier update. Right now, we'll throw it over to Kaylee Nix and Michael Vincent, who have our first live guest of the morning.